the original variables in phase space x of q and p to a new variable xi, say, which is equal to the new coordinates and the new momenta, such that the canonical Poisson brackets are preserved, such that the original Poisson brackets, which can be written in the form x alpha x beta is equal to omega alpha beta, where omega alpha beta is the alpha beta element of this capital omega matrix that I'd introduced. This should be equal to xi alpha xi beta. So that was the requirement for a canonical transformation. What does that say about the Jacobian matrix of a canonical transformation? That's easy to remember, because remember that if you had any two quantities f and g, the Poisson bracket of this was the gradient of f with respect to all the phase space variables. I don't know why this line falls on it. The gradient of f transpose the matrix omega, the gradient of g. This is what f comma g was. And let's write that out for xi alpha, xi beta, except I'd like to use proper notation for it. So we immediately have the gradient, which is delta over delta x sigma, for instance, psi alpha, omega alpha beta times delta xi. Oh, I should be careful. I've said xi alpha, xi beta, so let me write this properly. So we have delta xi alpha over delta x sigma omega sigma rho delta xi beta over delta x rho. This must be equal to omega alpha beta. That's the statement that this Poisson bracket is equal to omega alpha beta itself. There's a contraction over the symbols over the indices sigma and rho. They are summed over because they are repeated indices. If I wrote this out in matrix form, this quantity is nothing but the Jacobian matrix delta xi over delta x transposed, because sigma appears in the left here, times omega times delta xi over delta x. The Jacobian matrix must be equal to omega itself. This is what the definition of a canonical transformation is. Namely, it's a matrix, the Jacobian pointwise is a matrix M such that M transpose omega M is equal to omega itself. It's some kind of pseudo orthogonality condition, with this omega playing the role of some kind of metric in this space, in the phase space. So let's write that out. We have M transpose omega M is equal to omega. And using simple properties of omega, a large number of properties of this M can be found. The Jacobian matrix of a canonical transformation can be easily written down. Remember that omega squared is minus I, the 2n by 2n unit matrix, and that omega inverse is equal to omega transpose is equal to minus omega. So with these relationships, one can easily show that if M is a CT, so are M transpose and M inverse. They are also canonical transformations. It's easy to verify that the same relation as this basic relation will be satisfied both by the transpose of M as well as the inverse of M. You can also write the inverse of M in terms of the transpose by inverting this matrix. By the way, since M must have determinant M equal to +1, It is non-singular and therefore an inverse exists. It's also a canonical transformation. And it's easy to prove that M inverse can be written in terms of M transpose. It's something like minus omega M transpose omega or something like that. So I leave that to you to verify that it is indeed the case. So this is what the canonical transformations would be. And if M, M1, M2 are symplectic, are canonical transformation, I say that loosely. What I mean is they are Jacobian matrices of canonical transformations. Then so is M1, M2. So they form a group. Every group element has an inverse, a unique inverse, and they form a group which is now represented by 2n by 2n matrices in the way we've written it out. So this group is called the symplectic group, and we'll say a little more about it. And it's denoted by SP 2n because it's 2n by 2n matrices with entries in the real numbers, so SP 2n comma r. We have to find out how many generators this Lie group has. It's a Lie group. We need to find out how many generators it has. It is very clear that SP2n R are special matrices which satisfy that M transpose M transpose omega M equal to omega condition. So this must be a subgroup of the special linear group in 2n dimensions. Remember that this group here is specified by all 2n by 2n matrices with real entries and unit determinant. So it has 4n squared minus 1 generators. On the other hand, we have to figure out how many generators SP2n of 2n comma r has, and we'll do that in a minute. The way we'd approach it is the way we'd approach it for all Lie groups, and that is to say, let's suppose that this group SP2n has as generators, infinitesimal generators, J1, J2, up to some J sub r. So r is the number of generators of this Lie group SP2n comma r. When, as is the case with most Lie groups that we're familiar with, the general element of M as an element of SP2n comma r can be written in terms of parameters theta 1 up to theta 2r, that many parameters. This is equal to the exponential of a linear combination of the form theta 1 j1 plus etc. up to theta r jr. If you're a mathematician at this stage, this is the way you'd write it. If you're a physicist, you'd like to attach physical importance to these generators J1, J2, etc. And then you'd make these generators Hermitian operators. To keep this unitary, you would have to put an I factor and so on. I'm not doing any of these complications here. Besides, this group is actually a non-compact group. There are no finite dimensional unitary representations of this group. So let's just write it in this form for the time being and see where we get. M of 0, 0, all the way 0 is of course the identity transformation. Then it's easy to see that if I differentiate this with respect to any of the parameters, say theta sub k, I do delta m by delta theta sub k, and I set all the thetas to be equal to 0, which I'll just say theta equal to 0. This quantity, this will become the unit operator if I set all the thetas equal to 0. But first I differentiate with respect to theta sub k, and that pulls down jk, so this is just j sub k. This is the way you connect the infinitesimal generator to the finite element by an exponentiation operation. And then the derivative of this group element with respect to one of the parameters, setting all the parameters equal to 0, gives you the particular generator you're concerned with. So if you did this now, With this condition, m transpose omega m equal to omega. If I wrote m in this exponential form and differentiate it with respect to any particular different theta k, so differentiate one of the thetas, any of the thetas, k between 1 and r, this will imply if I differentiate this quantity m transpose first, then I'm going to pull down a jk, but with a transpose. Multiplied by omega, that remains as it is, multiplied by m at theta equal to 0, that gives you unit operator, plus the unit operator for m multiplied by the derivative of omega with respect to theta k, but there is no dependence on it, so that term doesn't appear. And the last term that appears is theta equal to 0 unit operator here, and then omega, and then derivative of m will be j sub k. This is equal to the derivative of omega with respect to theta sub k, and then setting theta sub k equal to 0. But omega is a constant matrix, no dependence on any parameters at all, so this quantity is 0. But we know that omega transpose is equal to minus omega. So this implies immediately, if I put it in here, omega times jk is equal to omega times jk, the whole transpose. Because I write this as minus omega transpose and move it to the right hand side, and that's just omega j the whole thing transposed. So what have we achieved? We've shown that every generator of the symplectic group sp2n must be such that omega times that generator must be a real valued symmetric matrix. But how many elements are there in a 2n by 2n symmetric matrix? Well, in a 2n by 2n symmetric matrix, there are 2n times 2n plus 1 divided by 2 independent elements. And the 2 cancels out. So this implies that this is equal to number of generators. The number of independent generators of the symplectic group sp2n comma r is n times 2n plus 1. And that's what we called R here. So you can see that this thing is a subgroup of SL2n comma R, because SL2n comma R has 4n squared minus 1 generators. On the other hand, sp2n comma R has only 2n squared plus n generators, and that's a smaller number than 4n squared in general. And therefore, this is a subgroup. This is not a proof that it's a subgroup, but it's obvious that it's a group which is 2 by 2n by 2n with real elements, etc., etc. So this thing is a subgroup of the linear group SL2n comma R. You must also notice that it's bigger than the rotation group SO2n, and we'll come to that in a second. But before that, I want to point out a very interesting fact, and that is what happens when n is equal to 1. That's a sufficiently interesting case to look at, not so much from the Hamiltonian dynamics point of view, but because of what's going to emerge as a group theoretic result. It's got a lot of ramifications. So let me spend a couple of minutes doing this. Well, when n equal to 1, you have 1 degree of freedom. So you just have a single q and p. And that goes under a canonical transformation to capital Q, capital P. What if I look at the family of linear transformations, linear canonical transformations? Well, in that case, linear CT implies a Jacobian matrix that's constant, because this would imply that Q is equal to AQ plus B, P, and capital P equal to some CQ plus DP, where A, B, C, D are real constants. That's the most general linear transformation that you could have. And we want to impose the condition that this is a canonical transformation. So the Jacobian in this case, delta xi over delta x, is obviously the matrix A, B, C, D. That's obvious because differentiate this with respect to Q, this with respect to P. In the second row, you write the second with respect to Q and respect to P. So this is the matrix that you get. If this is a canonical transformation, this would imply that A, this matrix transpose, which is C, and then a B and a D here, this quantity multiplied by omega, which let's write out, 0, 1, minus 1, 0. That's what omega reduces to for n equal to 1 case, times A, B, C, D must be equal to 0, 1, minus 1, 0. So this is the requirement on the constants A, B, C, D such that this be true. This condition is satisfied. And this condition, all you have to do is to multiply these three matrices together, and then it follows immediately that the condition that emerges is that AD minus BC times 0, 1, minus 1, 0 be equal to 0, 1, minus 1, 0, which in turn implies that the determinant of the transformation of M, which is equal to AD minus BC, be equal to 1. So that's a requirement. That's the condition that you get on imposing the constraint that this matrix A, B, C, D, 2 by 2 matrix with real elements, be a symplectic matrix. But this is just the condition that you have a 2 by 2 matrix with real elements A, B, C, D. A to D real, A, B, C, D real, such that the determinant AD minus BC equal to 1. What do you call this? This is again a matrix group. It's a group of all 2 by 2 non-singular matrices with unit determinant and real entries. And this is just an element of SL2, R. So we have this extremely interesting result that the group SL2, R, when n equal to 1 degree of freedom, the condition that the matrix be symplectic is sufficient, that Jacobian matrix be symplectic, is actually sufficient to say that it's also general element of SL2R, the linear group. It's enough to fix this matrix completely. So this quantity, this matrix, is isomorphic to SP2, R. This matrix SL2, R, this matrix group has many interesting properties, but they're all the same as those of the symplectic group SP2, R. This matrix also turns out to be isomorphic to SO at the Lie algebra level. So I hope Suresh will pardon me for saying this. This is SO2, 1. Just to say that these groups are related to each other. The Lie algebras are certainly related to each other, and also very loosely related in this loose sense to what is called the pseudo-unitary group SU1, 1. This is the special Lorentz group in 2 space and 1 time dimension, and this is the pseudo-unitary group SU1, 1. They're all the same group. So if you study SL2R, you've done everything, all these things here. SL2R has application in Gaussian optics, etc. SO2, 1 is a relativistic group. It's a Lorentz group. And so there are many, many connections that follow. So with this brief digression into this n equal to 1 case, let's go back to the more general case and ask, what happens if I took this condition m transpose omega m equal to omega and asked, what about the matrix omega itself? Suppose you have a canonical transformation whose Jacobian matrix is omega itself. What would that look like? Well, that would obviously look like if you wrote all the q's, q1 to qn, p1 up to pn, this column vector goes over into omega times the same column vector, which is equal to q1 all the way up to pn. Why is this not writing properly? What does this look like? Well, the simplest thing to do is to do it in the one by one case and see what happens. So you really have q p to be equal to 0 1 minus 1 0. Are you having the same problem seeing this as I am? Because it's not. And that's of course equal to p and minus q. And you can generalize this to n dimensions. So what's the result of this? If you say that omega itself is the Jacobian matrix, first of all, we got to verify if it satisfies this condition. We got to verify if omega transpose omega omega question mark is equal to omega itself. And the answer is yes, because omega transpose is minus omega and omega squared is minus the identity matrix. So this is certainly satisfied. It is certainly satisfied. And omega itself is a Jacobian matrix of a canonical transformation, which just happens to be a linear canonical transformation since the elements of omega are all constants. And what it does is to take the new q to be equal to little p and the new p to be equal to minus the original q. The canonical Poisson bracket relations are obviously satisfied. And we saw the example of this already. We know what the generating function of it is. It is formed either by a type 1 generating function, f1 of qq, which is equal to just little q times capital Q, or you can also look at it as a type 4 transformation, f4 of little p capital P, which is little p times capital P. So in a sense, this is the prototype typical canonical transformation locally. So this is a very, very crucial observation that this omega itself is a canonical transformation, which generates what you might call the generic, in some sense, generic canonical transformation. So that's a useful piece of information to know. Are there any questions on what I've said so far? Because now
Bala, are
I'm
you
going
there?
to turn. Yeah, I'm very much here. Yeah.
Go ahead, go
Can I
ahead.
go back? Can I go back to the screen? I can always come back to screen sharing, right?
Yeah. Whatever you do there, we
Uh,
see.
yeah, but I'm a little worried about moving the screen out because if I do, then everything.
No, no. You just use the back, no? Back thing in the thing.
Uh, where's the back?
You were doing it yesterday.
I was I was. The
Or
other
just
problem
it,
I have is that
the first
this
that I see.
all the icons are set at very small values and sizes, and I'm not able to see it properly. But there is no back there at all.
So the side, there is a sidebar. Is there a sidebar?
There's a sidebar.
Ah, that one. See what that is?
It's just giving me the
Yeah.
files,
That's showing you the,
all the
showing you the
pages,
title.
all the pages in the
You can
files.
click whatever you want.
Uh, there's one on this side too. No, it's not doing anything. It's just that once I click on something, it doesn't go back.
You just push it back. That. No, above, top left, like there's an arrow. No, next to that, arrow,
This one.
blue arrow. Yeah.
Okay. But I'm not sure how to get to the.
Open the pages, right? You want to go to the previous one, right?
No, I don't want to go to the previous one. I want to be able to see you.
Okay. So then you have to minimize. Is there a way to minimize this? No.
No, there is no minimization on this. It's occupying the full screen.
Try escape.
I could also do a drastic thing, which is to stop sharing, but that would be.
Yeah, you can stop sharing and then start share again. That's also fine.
Yeah, but why did I want to do that? I mean, you wanted to ask something? Somebody wanted to ask
No,
something?
nobody wanted to ask you anything. You just stopped.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to know if there were any questions.
Any questions? No questions, Bala.
No questions at all. I mean, everything is so crystal clear that there are no questions whatsoever. Well, the customary thing to do in live classes used to be, if there are no questions, then let me ask a few questions. But I dare not do that here. Any questions? Suresh, have you covered a little bit of B groups for them in this class?
I think I did the exponential. Yeah, I showed them that e power antisymmetric is orthogonal.
Was the
E
orthogonal? Yes, okay.
or Q Hermitian or I times Hermitian is unitary. That kind of.
Unitary, okay. So
But
they
I
know
need.
the number of generators of these
Yeah,
groups,
they should.
etc.
They should, but it's okay if they don't.
Mm-hmm. Do they have that in any math physics course?
Yeah,
Any
yeah. I think
elements of Lie groups,
if
classical groups?
I did in classical mechanics for sure.
Oh, you did. Okay. So rigid body motion is something you must
Yeah,
have
yeah,
covered.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
No,
So
they
we
even
have. Yeah. Please go ahead.
they've seen even special state of relativity. So
Okay.
should
All
also
right.
know.
Uh-huh. Okay. So have they seen SU 1, comma 1?
Sir, one
Yes.
question is that in the symplectic group 2NR, so there we saw that there is a symmetric matrix and it has a 2n into 2n plus 1 by 2 number of independent elements.
Yes.
So this equal to the number of generator, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Correct.
How can it become 4n square minus 1?
If you look at good point. If you look at
It doesn't become current standard. It is whatever.
SL of
That is
2n R.
4n plus n.
Only SL2R is the same as SP2R. That's the only.
Okay.
Yeah.
All other cases they are not.
Well, let me write this out.
So
N
he thought
equal to 1.
No,
N
no.
equal to 1 case, SL2, comma R
it's the same as.
is isomorphic to SP2, comma R.
That's a coincidence.
It's a
After that-
coincidence. But for n greater than equal to 2, SL2nR,
It's not.
there's a subgroup here, and that's SP2nR. Because this fellow here has 4n squared minus 1 generators, and this fellow here has n into 2n plus 1 generators. Okay. If you put n equal to 1, then both of them become 3. There are 3 generators for this, and there are 3 generators for SL2R, and there are 3 generators for SP2, I. If you play around a little bit, you can write down what these generators are. So let me do that. The infinitesimal generators of SL2R, it depends on the kind of convention you use. The 3 generators are 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, and 1, 0, 0, minus 1. These are the generators J1, J2, and J3 for SL2R and therefore SP2R also. Notice that this is sigma plus, this is sigma minus, this is sigma
No,
plus,
J
this
plus,
is sigma
Bala,
minus.
J1, why don't you call J1 J plus and J2 J minus?
Oh yeah, sorry, this is, I wrote the other representation, so this should be very good, thank you. J plus, J minus, and J3. And the usual commutators, J1, J plus with J minus, which gives you twice J3 and things like that, or whatever. This sp2n is already bigger than SO2n, as you can see, because SO2n would have 2n times 2n minus 1 over 2 generators, whereas sp2n has 2n times 2n plus 1 divided by 2 generators with a plus sign.
And the sum of them is 4n squared.
And the two add up to 4n squared,
Because one
exactly.
is the symmetric part, one is the antisymmetric part. So they separate.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Shall I go ahead? Any
Yes,
other
please.
questions? Any other questions? We can move in many directions now, but I would like to go ahead and do the following. I'd like to talk about what's known as dynamical symmetry. Or if you like, what happens if you apply Noether's theorem to classical Hamiltonian dynamics. So this is what we'd like to look at, and we'll take it in many slow steps from here. Now, the first thing we should ask is, taking common problems that we have, that we are familiar with, are they integrable or not in the Liouville-Arnold sense? So let's look at a two-dimensional problem in a plane, motion in a plane. So in this case, n is equal to 2. And let's look at the central force problem, just to get our bearing straight. In this case, the group of canonical transformations would be SP4, R. And how many generators would that have? N is 2. So 2 times 5 is equal to 10. So it's going to have 10 generators. That's a very large group. That's the group of canonical transformations. But let's write down the Hamiltonian for the central force problem and ask whether physics tells us whether it's integrable or not. The Hamiltonian is p squared over 2m plus some potential which depends on the radial distance from the origin, v of r. What are the constants of motion in this problem? First of all, we need for integrability, for Liouville-Arnold integrability, implies two functionally independent phi cons in involution. Can you identify two constants of the motion which Poisson commute with each other and which are independent of each other? This we use our knowledge of physics to do this. You all know the answer extremely well. So can anyone tell me what those two constants of the motion are, the two obvious ones? because this is the paradigm of what Liouville-Arnold integrability is all about and what super integrability is all about and so on. So let's get this out of the way first. What are the two constants of the motion that are in involution? Well, you've got a Hamiltonian that's autonomous, so certainly the Hamilton is a constant of the motion, the Hamiltonian. So H. What else is a constant of the motion? Louder, please.
Angular momentum.
Angular momentum about the origin. So certainly that's true. That's a constant of the motion. This is Q1P2 minus Q2P1. And we're guaranteed that H with L is equal to 0. So therefore, there is Liouville-Arnold integrability. Checks. Okay. Is there any other constant of the motion that you can find immediately in general? Which is independent of these two? What would you say? You see, the moment we have the Hamiltonian as a constant of the motion, L as a constant of the motion, extra constant, it means you can integrate Newton's equations of motion, or if you like, Hamilton's equations of motion. So you should be able to reduce this problem to at least the level of a first integral, right? And the total energy is given to you as E. If the total angular momentum is given to you, then if you write the energy out, if you write the Hamiltonian out, which is equal to P squared over 2m plus V of r. We can also write this as the radial momentum squared over 2m plus the angular momentum squared divided by twice the moment of inertia plus the potential is equal to the energy E. All I've done is to write the Hamiltonian out in plane polar coordinates, taking recognition of the fact that L is a constant of the motion and E is a constant of the motion, the total energy. But PR, this quantity, is in this case m dr over dt. So this will immediately imply for us that 1/2 m dr over dt, the whole square, plus the given angular momentum L squared over 2m r squared, plus the function V of r, which could be any central force at all, is equal to E. So that's it. All the inputs have gone in. The two constants of the motion E and L have been put in. This is the value of the Hamiltonian. This is the value of the angular momentum. And you still have to solve this first order differential equation, which is not difficult to solve. But in general, you won't get an analytic solution as an explicit function of t for the variable r, because this V of r could be very complicated. So this means this problem is integrable reduced to quadratures in other words, reduced to the solution of a differential equation, an ordinary differential equation, and no more. So we've got n equal to 2, 2n equal to 4, the phase space dimensionality. We have two COMs, two phi-coms. Problem is integrable, but not super integrable. For it to be super integrable, you need to have special kinds of V of r such that you can really write this equation down and solve this differential equation in terms of elementary functions, and you have an explicit function r of t as a function of t. That means there is one more constant of the motion somewhere here. If there is, then you can reduce this to such, you can solve the problem completely. It becomes super integrable, maximally super integrable, because the phase space dimensionality is 4, and you can at best have one more phi-com, not more than that, which will not be in involution with H and L, but which will be an independent constant of the motion all the same. So the central force problem in 2 dimensions is integrable in the Liouville-Arnold sense, but not super integrable because you don't have more than 2 constants of the motion, more than n equal to 2 constants of the motion in this problem. There are special cases where you do have an extra constant of the motion, and then you have what's called dynamical symmetry. But right now you can see that I've used all the geometric symmetry in the problem. The only geometric symmetry in the problem is rotational invariance because it's a central force. So I've used kinematical symmetry, but there's no dynamical symmetry in general for an arbitrary potential V of r. And that must be appreciated. There are cases, for instance, and we will see this very shortly, V of r, if it is proportional to r squared, for instance, or if it's proportional to 1 over r, for instance, the Kepler problem. These will have special features and give you one more independent phi com such that the problem is maximally super integrable. But otherwise, this is where you stop. And the guarantee is that once you have these 2 phi coms, H and L, you can make a canonical transformation to action angle variables and solve the problem in principle by reducing it to quadratures. So that's the situation with the 2-dimensional central force problem. What happens if you go to 3 dimensions? So let's look at 3-dimensional central force problem because that's the physical dimensionality we are living in. Oh, I don't know what is going on. What can we say in this case? Well, the Hamiltonian, once again, is p squared over 2m plus v of r. And what are the independent constants of the motion that we can think about? Now remember that n is equal to 3, 2n equal to 6, 6-dimensional phase space, and the symplectic group is enormous. sp6, r. So it has 3 times 3 2s are 6 plus 3 times 7, which is 21 generators. So that's a huge group. But what can we say about phi coms in this case? What are the phi coms in involution? We need at least 3 of them in involution. But let's write down the phi coms we can get by inspection from the kinematical symmetry in the problem, which is that it's rotationally invariant. So what are the invariants we can talk about?
Asking a question, somebody answer.
What are the independent constants of the motion that the 3-dimensional central force problem with rotational symmetry has? Because this is the first non-trivial case in some sense. Well, we start off with the Hamiltonian, of course. What else is a constant of the motion? Remember, for LA integrability, we need 3 of them.
Angular momentum.
Pardon me, angular momentum about the origin, but that's a vector. So each component is actually a constant of the motion. So you have H, L1, L2, L3, where L1 equal to Q2 P3 minus Q3 P2, and so on in cyclic permutation, etc. Okay. So you have these 4 constants of the motion, but you need only 3 of them for integrability. But the question is, are these in involution with each other or not? If they're not, they're useless.
Or L1, L2, L3.
Come on, think about it. I'm asking all the interview questions. So
Does L1 commute with L2? No.
what's the Poisson bracket of Li with Lj?
I?
where ij run over 1, 2, 3.
Somebody
Where you
saying
write
I
that.
epsilon ijk lk, but there's no I.
There's no I in this problem. Everything is valued. So apart from that, you're right. Li Lj is equal to ijk Lk. Ijk run over the values 1, 2, 3. So it's clear that no two of these Poisson commute with each other. Therefore, you are stuck with H and one of them, any one of them, choose, pick whatever you like. It doesn't matter which one you choose. Conventionally, people like to choose L3. So that is certainly a constant of the motion in involution with the Hamiltonian, because this is certainly true. H with Li equal to 0 for all the i's. I equal to 1, 2, 3. So H has been chosen, L3 has been chosen. Anything else can be chosen?
Somebody says L square.
Very good. So you can choose L squared. Because you're guaranteed that H with L squared is also 0. And you're further guaranteed that Li with L squared is 0. So here we are. We have three functionally independent constants of the motion, which are all in involution with each other. And no more. We don't have more than that. That's it. This is exactly what is needed for Liouville-Arnold integrability, and the problem is completely integrable. But it's not super integrable, although you have extra constants of the motion. These guys here are independent of L1 and H. At the same time, they don't commute. L1 commutes with H, L2 commutes with H, L3 commutes with H, but they don't commute among each other. Whereas you need for Liouville-Arnold integrability n quantities, constants of the motion, which are mutually Poisson commuting, and that we have, this set here. So it's LA integrable. LA criterion is satisfied in this problem here. But there is a small wrinkle to this. You see, you have one constant of the motion, 2, 3, 4 constants of the motion. But these fellows are, while they are independent of each other, they don't Poisson commute with each other. And therefore, we chose the set H, L3, L squared as the set of constants of the motion in involution with each other. However, there are 4 constants of the motion which are functionally independent of each other. No? And these 3 form an algebra. The algebra is trivial if you bring in the Hamiltonian, because they all commute to the Hamiltonian. But how many do you need? You remember that we have n equal to 3, 2n equal to 6. So in this 6-dimensional phase space, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 constants of the motion, which are functionally independent of each other. And 3 of them can be chosen, not these constants, but combinations of them can be chosen, such they're in involution. So this implies LA integrability. But we have 4 photons. Which is bigger than 3. So this problem is actually super integrable. It's more than integrable. There's an extra constant of the motion which restricts the trajectories in phase space to submanifold, and it's super integrable. But it's not maximally super integrable. That would happen if you had yet another functionally independent constant of the motion. So let's see. This already tells us it's super integrable. We're able to reduce the problem to quadratures. How do we do that? Well, in this problem, again, writing it out as PR squared over 2m plus angular momentum squared over 2m r squared plus p of r equal to E in this fashion. We are again guaranteed that the problem is reduced to quadratures. So unless you know some special form of P of R, you can't go beyond this. You can solve it numerically, but you can't get analytic expressions for the trajectories in general for arbitrary V of r. Now, what is this L squared in this case, by the way? What is this L squared in terms of spherical polar coordinates? How do I write the angular momentum in terms of the quantities p sub theta and p sub phi, which are the conjugate momenta for the spherical polar coordinates theta and phi? What is L squared in terms of those two guys? How is L squared related to p theta and p phi? Straightforward enough question, but you know the answer in terms of spherical polar coordinates. What is this?
I mean, people are saying something, they are murmuring behind
Yeah,
us.
say it loudly, because if you murmur and you can't be heard, then it's useless. You have to speak up.
It's not visible. Bala,
Yeah.
there is some time lag between what you're writing and what is visible. It's coming in bursts, but your
Oh.
video audio is perfect.
Can I
Now we
switch
see
off
it.
my video?
And now we see it.
Okay. So what is L squared? The square of the angular momentum in terms of the canonically conjugate momenta p theta and p phi. Just as we had PR with radial momentum, we have the angular momenta here. Well, this thing should already tell you, if you expand P radial and angular coordinates, it should already tell you what it is.
Anybody know what this is?
Well, all I'm writing, this entire thing is writing extra r dot squared in spherical polar coordinate.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the first term is p theta squared plus,
P5
that happens
square
now.
theta.
Well, p phi squared
I think
divided
you
by,
and I
the moment you have p phi, you must have sine squared theta
Sine
here.
square theta.
That's it. That's it. So that combination is the constant of the motion. Mind you, p theta is not a constant of the motion, p phi is not a constant of the motion, but this particular combination here is guaranteed to be a constant of the motion.
P5 is a constant of motion because
Sorry,
is
p phi is a constant of the motion, but p theta is not, and theta is not. But there's compensation between these so that L squared is a constant of the motion. Okay? So this problem is integrable, it is super integrable, but not maximally super integrable, unless this V of r provides you is a function such that there is one more phi com, which makes it phi coms in a six-dimensional phase space. And that again happens for the Kepler potential 1 over r and the harmonic oscillator potential r squared. Those two make it maximally super integrable. So let's go over to the two-dimensional harmonic oscillator and see what the symmetry looks like there, because that's a classic illustration of all that I'm saying. Okay. So we have two-dimensional, I don't want to use this ink. What's going on? Two D harmonic oscillator. It's linear, by the way. Linear harmonic oscillator. And the Hamiltonian is the following. I'm going to write this out explicitly and then we will simplify it. If the masses of the oscillators are the same, then it's equal to P1 squared over 2m plus P2 squared over 2m plus 1/2 m omega 1 squared q1 squared plus 1/2 m omega 2 squared q2 squared. This is separable in the two coordinates 1 and 2, and therefore it's two one-dimensional problems put together and is trivially integrable. Okay. What are the constants of the motion? Well, we need two phi comps. One of them is the energy of the first oscillator, and the other one is the energy of the second oscillator, which would give us another constant of the motion in involution, and therefore it is LA integrable. That's the end of that. But now let's look at a special case of this, which seems to have some extra symmetry. So let's put circular symmetry in the problem, which would mean that the two oscillators have exactly the same frequency. So the isotropic (2D) oscillator, isotropic means same property in all dimensions, has a Hamiltonian which is the same as this Hamiltonian with omega equal to omega 1 equal to omega 2, and I'm going to set m equal to 1, omega 1 equal to omega 2 equal to 1. So this Hamiltonian becomes 1/2 q1 squared plus p1 squared plus q2 squared plus p2 squared. Simple quadratic form of this kind here. And now let's take stock and ask what happens. By the way, you could also write this in polar coordinates, in which case there would be an r squared up here, because q1 squared plus q2 squared is just r squared here. And therefore it's a central force, and therefore it has the extra spherical symmetry, rotational or circular symmetry in this problem here. Now, since there are two constants of the motion in involution, the problem is certainly integrable. But the moment you have this extra symmetry, you expect further constants of the motion, and indeed there are. What is that constant of the motion that you have here, which is extra? So let's go to the next page. You certainly have the Hamiltonian as a constant of the motion. In fact, this buries two constants of the motion. This has got h1 plus h2, the Hamiltonians of the two individual oscillators. They are in involution with each other, and you got this. But you also got, if you regard this as a single oscillator moving in a plane with a spring that is isotropic, then this also has this quantity L, which is q1p2 minus q2p1 as a constant of the motion. That by itself is sufficient to say that the problem is Liouville-Arnold integrable, but we are looking for beyond that. We are looking for some symmetry which is more than just rotational symmetry. Can we detect any such thing here at all? And if so, what are the generators? What's the group? What are the generators? And so on. Let's go back and stare at this a little bit. So we have 1/2 q1 squared plus p1 squared plus q2 squared plus p2 squared. We are looking for the symmetry group of this Hamiltonian. What is meant by that is that we want that group of transformations of these variables such that Hamilton's equations are preserved in structure. In other words, it must be a canonical transformation. So 1, we're looking for CTs. It must be a canonical transformation. And 2, it must take solutions to solutions. In other words, the form of Hamilton's equations must also be unchanged. Whereas that's not necessarily true. If you go to angular action variables, for instance, the form of the Hamiltonian may change. But we would like to have all those transformations which leave the Hamiltonian unchanged in form. So H unchanged in form. Now let's apply our heavy machinery, what we've learned about canonical transformations. These canonical transformations would belong to the group SP4, R, because we're looking at n equal to 2. What are the transformations that leave this Hamiltonian unchanged in QP space?
O4.
O4. So if you want the determinant to be 1, we want the matrix. These are all SO4. 4 comma R, but that's understood. So the group of rotations in this 4-dimensional space of the Q's and P's leaves this hypersphere unchanged. This looks like a hypersphere. If you put this equal to constant, it's like the surface of a sphere in 4 dimensions, and that quantity is left unchanged. This value here specifies the sphere, and therefore the group of transformations is SO4. How many generators does this have? N is equal to 2.
10.
10 generators. How many generators does SO4 have? Well, how many generators does SON have? There are n times n minus 1 over 2 possible generators. So this is 4, and therefore 4 times 3 over 2, which is 6 generators. Right? So already there is a conflicting thing here. The question is, we want something which satisfies this as well as this. Therefore, we want a subgroup of sp4 comma r such that this is unchanged in form. So if you like, the intersection of this group with this group is what is needed. And it will be smaller than either of these groups. So any guesses as to what this should be? You see, the problem is all canonical transformations do not leave H unchanged in form. Can you give me an example of that? The answer is yes, immediately. Because the moment I go to action angle variables for this, if I take action angle variables for this harmonic oscillator problem, then this goes under the canonical transformation to I1 plus I2 times omega. Omega has been set equal to 1. So it just becomes the sum of the two action variables. That's very different in form than this Hamiltonian. So therefore, all canonical transformations do not leave H unchanged in form. That's immediately obvious from the fact that this problem is integrable in angle action variables. On the other hand, all transformations belonging to SO4 cannot be canonical transformations either. Because suppose I rotate in this, I take this Hamiltonian and rotate in Q1 P2 in the Q1 P2 plane. That leaves Q2 and Q1 P2 plane. That leaves Q2 and P1 unchanged. That's certainly not a canonical transformation, but it belongs to SO4. So it's immediately clear that what is needed is some kind of intersection of these two groups, something in between. So all SO4 transformations which leave the Hamiltonian unchanged don't belong to the group of canonical transformations, and all canonical transformations don't belong to the group of transformations in SO4 which leave H unchanged. So what's the answer to this problem? Is that you want a group which is in between SP4 comma R something in between the two, and that group turns out to be SU2. The group of unitary transformations of 2 by 2 unitary matrices with unit determinant, 2 by 2 matrices with complex entries. How can we see this in a sort of a quick way? Well, suppose I write Q1 plus IP1 equal to Z1 and Q2 plus IP2 equal to Z2. Okay. And then I write Z1, Z2 as equal to A, a column vector A, which is Z1, Z2. Then A transpose is equal to Z1, Z2. Complex conjugate transpose, A dagger, is Z1 star, Z2 star. And you can see that the Hamiltonian can be written as A dagger A. This is just equal to 1/2 Q1 squared plus P1 squared plus etc., provided you be careful about putting square root of 2's everywhere. 1 by root 2 times this, 1 by root 2 times this, etc. And this is a quadratic form which is invariant under what sort of transformations? The most general transformation you can think of is a unitary transformation. So if A goes to U times A, U dagger equal to U dagger U equal to I, and we want the whole thing to have the same measure as before, so they must belong actually to the group SU2. Unitary transformations with unit determinant. So that's the group, that's the dynamical symmetry group of this Hamiltonian, of the two-dimensional isotropic oscillator. Now let's take stock of this. This is a heuristic kind of way of understanding it, but we need to write down the generators of this SU2 and ask what their algebra is, etc., which we'll do in a minute. Here we are. How many generators does SU2 have? How many generators does SUN have? SU2 is locally the same as SO3. So how many generators are there for SO3 in real space? The Lie algebra of SU2 is the same as the Lie algebra of the orthogonal group in 3 dimensions of SO3. So again, J1, J2, J3, and so on. And this has 3 generators. SUN has n squared minus 1 generators. Okay? And the question is, can we find these generators? And they must be constants of the motion, because now I write down the statement. This is Noether's theorem. In Hamiltonian mechanics, Hamiltonian dynamics. You know Noether's theorem already in Lagrangian dynamics. Is that familiar material, Suresh? Would you know the Noether's theorem in Hamilton?
We did do some work. Yeah.
Okay. So if you have a continuous group of transformations under which the action is invariant, the Lagrangian changes at best by the total derivative of some function of the coordinates and time. And then you have the possibility of a conserved quantity. So there is symmetry, invariance, and conservation. These 3 are related by Noether's theorem. Noether's theorem in Hamiltonian dynamics says those generators, so let's say this less ponderously. Generators of canonical transformations that are also constants of the motion, namely they commute with the Hamiltonian, are the generators of the dynamical symmetry group. So it satisfies both conditions. They must leave the Hamiltonian unchanged, they commute to the Hamiltonian, and therefore they leave it unchanged in form. And they are canonical transformations because they are generators by definition of canonical transformations. So we need to find 3 quantities from the physical variables that we have in the 2-dimensional oscillator problem, which will have an algebra which is that of SU2, and it's then guaranteed to be the dynamical symmetry group of the 2D isotropic oscillator. And these 3 are the following. So let me write it down. There's J1 is 1/4 Q1 squared plus P1 squared minus Q2 squared minus P2 squared. So it's not the Hamiltonian, but the sum of the difference of energies of the two oscillators, if you look at it that way. J2 is 1/2 Q1 Q2 plus P1 P2, and J3 is our old friend Q1 P2 minus Q2 P1. I urge you to verify that Ji, Jj equal to epsilon ijk, jk, for ijk running 1, 2, 3. This is just the SU2 algebra or the SO3 algebra. They're both the same D algebra. These three operators, J1, J2, J3, these three generators, they do not mutually commute with each other, but they're all guaranteed to commute to the total Hamiltonian. So therefore, they are constants of the motion that are generators of the dynamical symmetry group of the 2D oscillator, which is SU2 in this case. So notice what has happened. We've got extra constants of the motion. So once again, as you can see in the two-dimensional phase space, you have the Hamiltonian and then you have J1, J2 and J3. So it immediately tells you that this problem is actually super integrable and maximally so. You could ask next, what happens if I have n dimensions? What would happen? By the way, what's the degeneracy of this Hamiltonian in quantum mechanics? The moment there is this extra dynamical symmetry in the problem, is the super integrable, you have degeneracy in the problem. You already have it when you have rotational symmetry, but over and above that, you have higher degeneracy in the problem. And what's the degeneracy of the two-dimensional harmonic oscillator, isotropic harmonic oscillator? So you have a Hamiltonian, which is just the usual one that I've written down, 1/2 Q1 squared plus dot 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 plus P2 squared. What are the energy levels of this Hamiltonian? Well, they are like the Hamiltonian, the energy levels of two separate oscillators. So the energy levels E are classified by two quantum numbers n1, n2, which is h cross omega. If you put that back in here, n1 plus n2 plus 1, where the integers n1 and n2 run from 0, 1, 2, etc. What is the degeneracy Gn? So I could write En equal to n plus half, n plus 1 h cross omega, n equal to 0, 1, 2, etc. and ask what is Gn equal to? What is the degeneracy of the nth level equal to?
What is it?
It's obviously equal to the number of ways in which you can take this non-negative integer n and split it into two non-negative integers n1 and n2. So what is Gn equal to?
Somebody, n.
Well, it's the number of ways of putting n objects in two boxes. So if here's the partition between the two boxes, you put some of these guys here, and you put some of these guys here. In how many ways can you put n oranges starting from 0 into two boxes? You may have an empty box, you can put all of them here, it doesn't matter. In how many ways can you do this? Well, it's clear that this box can have 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to n, so clearly there are n plus 1 ways of doing this. Okay? What is it for the three-dimensional oscillator? I have a 3D oscillator, so you have n1 plus n2 plus n3 plus 3 halves here. And again, you can write it as n plus 3 halves times h cross omega, the energy levels. And what would it be for 3D? What's the number of ways of putting a non-negative integer n, partitioning it into 3 non-negative integers n1, n2, and n3? The degeneracy of the 3D oscillator. These are these are basic facts which you must have at your fingertips, because they are very, very typical interview questions. Well, you have 2 boxes now, so you have 2 partitions, box 1, box 2, box 3. And all these are identical objects, so the number of ways of permuting all these objects is n plus 2. So we have n plus 2 factorial divided by, the oranges are all identical to each other, so there's an n factorial. The 2 partitions are identical to each other, so there is a 2 factorial, and therefore this is equal to 1/2 n plus 1 times n plus 2. And I leave you to work out what it is for the n-dimensional oscillator, where n is an arbitrary integer. Okay. So coming back to what we were saying, let me see if we can get this thing here. These 3 quantities, these 3 operators satisfy the Lie algebra SU2, and you can ask now what is what is going to happen to the 3-dimensional oscillator. So H is equal to summation I equal to 1 to 3, 1/2.
Bala, in the 2D, I have a question in the 2D case.
1 second.
Why is it not U2? U2
Yeah,
is the
it could very well be U2, but U2 will not preserve the determinant.
Okay.
The determinant will become e to the I theta, right?
Yes, yes.
So that makes it. Actually, I have not included. Yeah, that's a good question. But I have also not included, as a slightly related thing. In rotational symmetry, you also have, that's a continuous symmetry. So you can also have O3, for instance, or you can have reflections
That's a
with
discrete,
determinant
right?
1.
Because only continuous
Those are
part is-
discrete transformations. Yeah, continuous one is the only possibility, but you could have discrete things like things which involve reflections and parity and so on. So given this oscillator, we need to know what the whether it's Liouville-Arnold integrable. So it's clear that each of these Fi equal to Qi squared plus Pi squared is a constant of the motion in involution with the other 2 such constants of the motion. So automatically you have 3 constants of the motion in n equal to 3 dimensions, and therefore the problem is Liouville-Arnold integrable. You can separate it also in spherical polar coordinates, etc., and do the usual thing. It's a central force problem. So the question is it super integrable? And if so, what are the other phi comps involved here? It's already super integrable because it goes, we have H and L1, L2, L3. So we have 4 constants of the motion right away which are independent of each other. But the question is, does it go beyond that? Does it give you 5 constants of the motion? Is there anything else? And the answer is yes. It turns out that in this case, the symmetry group once again is a subgroup of sp6, R on the one hand, and you have SO6 on the other hand, but it's somewhere in between the 2, and the group here is SU3. And you can again see this by writing Qi plus I times Pi as Zi. So this would again be of the form A dagger.
That's not correct. No, SU3 is SO6 intersection SP6.
I'm sorry. Yeah, this is a mess. This is not a... Yes, we want the intersection of SP6, R intersection with SO6. And that's SU3. Is this right, Suresh?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So the question is, how many generators does SU3 have? Again, SU3 has n squared minus 1 generators, which will give you 8 generators, but the phase space itself is only 6-dimensional. So showing clearly that these are all not independent generators at all. There's connections between them. That doesn't matter, but they satisfy a Lie algebra, and that will be the symmetry group of this system, which is SU3 here. But can we write these down in terms of the Q's and P's is the question, and the answer is yes. You actually have the angular momentum components, Lij equal to Qi Pj minus Qj Pi. You have 3 of these guys, and then you have 8 more of them. Let me call it, for want of a better symbol, as Tij is Qi Qj plus Pi Pj. It's a symmetric rank 2 tensor, and you can write down all these tensors and write down the algebra between them. By the way, the Hamiltonian is just the trace of this tensor, so it's not an independent quantity here. And then it turns out that you can find 8 such combinations which satisfy the Lie algebra of SU3. And that's the dynamical symmetry group of this problem. There are other technical things here, such as the rank of this Lie algebra, etc., which I won't get into now, except to mention, perhaps I'll mention it quickly. When you have a semi-simple Lie algebra, the question is how many of the generators of this Lie algebra commute with each other, mutually commuting generators, and that's called the rank of the Lie algebra. It's also the number of independent Casimir operators or invariants, which is functions of the generators which commute with all the generators. So SO3, for example, has 3 generators, and the rank of SON is the floor function of SO, so rank equal to the floor function of 3 over 2, which is equal to, what am I saying? Which is equal to 1. That's correct. Yeah. So if you have SON, it's got n times n minus 1 over 2 generators. And the rank of SON is equal to the floor function of n over 2. So SO4 has got 2 generators, 2 Casimir operators. So this is equal to number of Casimirs. In this case. For SUN, let me write down the answers for SUN. The number of generators is n squared minus 1, and the rank is n minus 1. So SU2 has rank 1, which is the same as the rank of SO3. And that's the reason, that's one of the reasons why these Lie algebras could be identical. They actually are identical. And there's, as you know, a 2-to-1 homomorphism between SU2 and SO3. So to summarize, again, I should slowly wind down. What we've seen, the main lesson I wanted to mention was this. Noether's theorem in Hamiltonian dynamics, that is, to find the true symmetry group, dynamical symmetry group of a Hamiltonian system that's integrable, you find the group of all generators of canonical transformations that also commute to the Hamiltonian, that are therefore also constants of the motion. And that set of operators, or Casimir, and that set of generators, they generate the so-called dynamical symmetry group of the Hamiltonian, which means they generate the set of transformations which takes the solution space to itself in the Hamiltonian, of this Hamiltonian system. And this dynamical symmetry group generally happens beyond, over and beyond the kinematical symmetry group like rotation, rotational symmetry, etc., when the Hamiltonian has very special forms. In the case of central forces, it happens when the Hamiltonian is either the Kepler potential or the harmonic isotropic oscillator potential. There are other non-central forces where you have such extra degeneracies, but we haven't touched upon that here, especially in 3 dimensions. And the classification of such potentials in n dimensions is an open problem. There are many, many other aspects that I haven't touched here, but I hope this gives you some inkling of the power of these methods, where group theory and topology are combined along with dynamics to understand dynamical problems. So let me stop here now and await any comments or questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
I should
Okay, so Bala, you're done with what you wanted to do, right?
more or less done.
Okay.
So, but if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer
Yeah.
them. I mean,
Okay.
now or later. I mean,
Any questions?
whenever people have time. I should mention that there is a book by Jose and Saletan. Have you mentioned that in class to them? It's called Classical Dynamics, a Contemporary Perspective. And it has a lot of material on the differential geometric view of classical mechanics, done in a very accessible way, a way which is accessible to physicists. So that's a nice book to read. Doesn't talk all about the group theory part of it that I mentioned, but there are other texts and so on. And Arnold's books, of course, are all-time classics in this regard. One final